deadlifting principles. There's really just two that I want you to walk away remembering anytime you practice a movement that even slightly resembles a deadlift. If you can understand and apply the basic principles of a deadlift, your brain is going to figure out the little nuances of the mechanics to make it happen. Now, there are two specific principles that I would say spend the most of your time focusing on while you're trying to deadlift. The first one is hip drive. It is a hip dominant movement. That doesn't mean that the other parts of your body don't contribute some movement, but we're really trying to keep it driving mainly from the hips. The second principle is you want to keep the load as tight to your body as you possibly can. Why? Because physics tells us the further a weight is away from your center of mass, the more effort it's going to take to move it. So I'm going to apply these two principles with a bar, with a set of kettlebells, and a sandbag. The principles between each one are going to remain the same, but the mechanics my body is going to use, the technique my body is going to use to accomplish it might look a little different from one tool to the next. That's why it's so important to stay focused on principles over mechanical technique. First thing I do is I get real close to the bar. I'm going to grab onto it. Notice I'm sitting forward. This part of my body stays relatively flat and very rigid. Here is where the majority of that movement's coming from. So it is hip dominant. I'm going to grab onto the bar. I'm going to keep it tight to my body, and I'm going to hinge at the hips. So I think butt back as far as I can, butt forward. Now, as far as keeping it tight to my body, I'm keeping this bar in contact with my legs the whole time. I'm not letting it drift away from me at all. With kettlebells or dumbbells, same thing. I'm going to make it hip dominant. I'm going to push my butt back and forward. This is the area that's driving the movement. Second thing, I'm going to keep these bells as tight to my body as I can, not letting them drift around anywhere. Grab onto it. Get everything nice and tight through the back. Really drive with the hips. Keep the bells tight to your body. Sit it down. See how those bells are staying really close to my body, and I'm driving mainly with the hips. Now, you may have noticed there's a little bit difference in how much movement was coming from my knees, my ankles and stuff between those two. But again, staying focused on the same principles. Your body is going to figure out what's going to work best for you. Just know that you want to keep it hip dominant and you want to keep the weight tight to your body. It's going to look even more different with the sandbag. Now, with this tool, I have to position my feet a little different. Obviously, I can't get my feet to the inside of that. I got to straddle it. And again, I want this thing as close to my center of mass as possible. So I'm actually kind of standing over the top of it. Again, driving back with your hips because this is a hip dominant movement. Get yourself a good hold. Drive with the hips. Keep it close to your body. Okay? Now, one simple way to tell if you are keeping it hip dominant is you're going to feel it more in your butt muscles and your hamstring muscles. Another way to visually see if you're keeping it hip dominant is generally, if it's hip dominant, your hips aren't going to drop below your knees during a deadlift motion. So you saw that the technique my body used naturally between each of these tools might have looked a little different, but the principles are always the same. Hip drive, keep the weight as tight to your body as you can. Happy lifting.